Well, hello, I'm Kelly Clement, the documentary programmer for the 2021 Mill Valley Film Festival. And I want to thank all of our supporters, and I'd like to thank you all for turning out for this festival in this very unusual year we find ourselves in. And I'd like to introduce Susan Stern, the director of Bad Attitude, The Art of Spain Rodriguez. And we also have Victoria B. Fender, who was associate producer and co-editor, and B. Quincy Griffin, composer. We're very honored to have all of you here and very honored to be screening your wonderful film at the Mill Valley Film Festival. Bad Attitude had its premiere at Slam Dance Film Festival this past year and has just begun on its festival journey, and I'm sure it's going to be invited to screen at many festivals around the country. Actually, I've got to confess, this was one of the first documentaries I programmed this year for our own festival. And how could I not share it with our audience, being about a San Francisco icon by a very talented Bay Area filmmaker? It's one of the most powerful and thought-provoking documentaries I've seen in a long time, and one that will definitely be guaranteed to generate a lot of discussion. So let's jump in here. Now, Susan, it's been almost 10 years since Spain passed away. Did he know that you were going to be making a film of his life? And what inspired you to tell the story of his life, and also the history of underground comics, which by all means would probably be controversial?
Well, first I want to thank you, Kelly. I'm so thrilled to have Bad Attitude at Mill Valley. This is home. This is home for underground comics. This was home for Spain and I, and so much of the crew. So we're just really thrilled to have it here and be here in person for the screenings. Right before Spain died, he had a big art show, and I made a short version of this film, and he was very happy. He was smiling watching it. So I think he knew what he got into, marrying me and being with me for 33 years, that I'd end up documenting his life, and he was happy about that. And I had to make the film. I'm a big fan of his, and I felt like I really wanted the world to see his work as the art that it is and really understand underground comics.
And so at what point did you begin production?
So I began filming before he died, thankfully. And then just continued filming after he died. And we just added it bit by bit. Victoria was part of this from before there was a film, because in addition to the film, we made a amazing database, of a visual database of all of his work, and she was very much a part of that. I like to say that Spain never met a piece of paper he didn't like. So he saved everything, but it was all in a huge jumble, and Victoria was part of that process. She came on board for Spain's memorial. We had a large memorial at the Brava Theater in San Francisco. She came aboard to sort out the art and also to make the audiovisual assets for the memorial.
And how about the archival footage? It's amazing. It's just riveting.
Yeah, that was such an adventure. We had such an adventure tracking down archival footage, strange things, wonderful things that happened. Some archival footage that never made it in. We tracked down this documentary from the 1960s that we couldn't find. And then, of course, when we finally found the person that had it, it was a documentary about the cartoonist Al Cap. Turned out his granddaughter lived in the Mission District. This huge search led us to our own backyard to finding her. I also have to give props to Victoria. She's like the absolute bulldog of archival footage. So she uncovered all these bizarre things. She was so insistent that we have the highest quality footage that she would track it all the way back to the source. And we actually found one source where the footage was lousy. And when Victoria pressed them on it, it turns out they had appropriated it from a different archive and were trying to sell us their copies.
Well, this is a very complex and layered work, and I'm sure it went through many different phases. Um, Beginning in a more traditional way of looking at Spain's youth and moving to his career as an artist. And basically, it unfolds into embracing his cartoons as political art, basically. Um, the editing is just wonderfully paced, and the way you blend all the historical archival footage with Spain's drawing is very riveting. And it's amazing to be able to actually see his artwork enlarged on a big screen rather than on the comic book page, as we usually do. And you're able to realize how intricate but effectively simple his art was. And how were you able to put together all his artwork and get it up there on the big screen?
Yeah, and I keep having to thank Victoria, and later I want to thank Quincy for the way he composed music to that work, because I think, you know, if it's done perfectly like he did it, you don't even notice how much the music is helping you be able to really see the art. But we went through a lot. We had scanned a lot of art, but then we went back and we scanned everything at 4K resolution. Victoria created this amazing database of the scans so that our artist, the incredible Noel Honig, based in New York, could then do movement on the art and really make it filmic. Comics is already filmic, but the way that Noel moved on it and the way that Victoria did experimental moves on it before Noel took it over really made us able to translate a two-dimensional, still vertical medium. That was the other problem. Comics are vertical, film is horizontal. And so that was a real effort to translate comic books into film.
So what was it like for you, Victoria, to get all these different sources and all these different pages of artwork? How did you deal with that?
Well, I feel really proud and honored to have been able to, I feel like, be a witness to Susan's creativity, but also watching editors Elizabeth Finlayson and Jim Hoff, and his name escapes me, Susan, please
Bill
remember.
Weber.
Bill Weber, thank you. Because I really felt like a supporting role to them, and the graphic artist.
Noel Honig.
Noel Honig. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking out right now. But I felt really proud to have been part of the archive as well, to really go through all of his artwork and see how prolific it was, see kind of a preview to the film, and also to witness Susan and her process, you know, how personal it was. This was their story, their family. So, and also it felt very universal, you know, I felt very passionate and I had a lot of love for it. And so I guess that was the guiding force. And I love his art as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it really shows up.
Yeah.
Did you go through different ideas of how you wanted it assembled? I mean, right now it's fairly chronological. Do you ever have any other concepts?
Is this question for me or Susan? Sorry.
Both.
I wouldn't say I was a decider in that. I had my ideas, and they're mostly about the visual aspects of it. I'm a colorist as well, so I have a very strong eye. That was my passion behind good resolution archive footage. But I would say the deciding aspects of the story, the structure, was Susan, Elizabeth Finlayson, Jim Hoff, and Bill Weber. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add to that. Of course, it was tremendous struggle, Kelly, so many different versions. And there was a whole period where we tried a flashback version. We tried starting in different places, but ultimately you had to understand who he was to understand anything about what he did. And we just kept coming back to needing to root the story in his childhood, to root the story in the history of comics and what happened in the 1950s with the suppression of comics. And we just had to stay rooted there. There was too much that people didn't know to really appreciate underground comics. And so we ended up in that structure. We also experimented with other ways to focus the film. There were times when the film was focused on being more about myself and about Spain and my daughter, Nora Rodriguez, whose animation graces the film. And again, we came back to that it needed to be centered on Spain.
Thank goodness. And Quincy, I wanted to bring you in here. You created the original score for this film. And it's just lovely how you used the music from different time periods that as Spain moved through his life, like the R&B of Jesse Hill and Ben King, and then rock and roll of Jerry Lee Lewis, as well as the Fugs and Charles Mingus and Santana. But it blended in all together so seamlessly with your own composition, so that most of the time I was never aware that there was a change going on. It all seemed about the journey. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you composed?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Kelly, and thanks for inviting me to this, Susan. Well, you know, I was fortunate to arrive when the film was already in sort of its end, you know, the end goal was in sight. And so, you know, Susan had really mapped out a lot of the sort of timeline in terms of progression musically of what's happening. And she had cool stuff going on with like Santana cues in there and the Stand By Me and those kind of things. And so, you know, my approach for this really ended up being kind of following this eclectic mix and the eclectic life that he had, where he just had so many cool different aspects to his life, like the stuff with the, you know, doing the murals in San Francisco Mission, and then his early days and the biker stuff. And there was just like so much material to work with musically. So I really was just kind of having a lot of fun being able to bounce around stylistically. And, you know, I thought it worked really well, how everything was a sort of eclectic soundscape. So.
Yeah. I would just like to add something about a couple of things about Quincy's work and what he brought to it. One is there's a wonderful spot in the film where Spain, it talks about him moving to the Mission District in San Francisco and his role in the Latino art scene. And we're coming out of a piece about his relationship with me, and the song that is playing is Stand By Me, which is actually Spain and my song. And then we had sort of had this idea of moving from the Stand By Me version, the Ben King version, to a Latin infused version of it. And we had just changed the music. And then Quincy came along and said, well, if you're going to do this, then you need to really do this. And he brought in the wonderful vocalist, Luckman Frank, who often plays with a Mill Valley band. And he begins to sing in Spanish. And does this beautiful rendition in Spanish of Stand By Me as we enter the Mission District. And that it gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. So I wanted to say that thing. And yeah, just that Quincy had this concept, I think, if I'm not misstating, of kind of bringing the film into the present ultimately. And I think you say that in one of the most beautiful pieces of Quincy's that you'll see. There's a wonderful shot toward the end of this film where Spain is actually caught old man doing graffiti tagging on the streets of the Mission District. And this is really a beautiful original piece, I think, where Quincy kind of brings it all together and brings all these time periods into the present.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Right? And especially the end, when we're talking about Nora and her animation, the music behind that, it's just,
yeah,
touching.
Thanks. Appreciate it. And one correction, which is, I'm glad that it fooled you, but so Lukman sang the soul part of Stand By Me, and then it's actually a different vocalist who sings the Spanish version. And I don't have his name in front of me, but it's another session guy. But it worked great that they fused together so well that it seems like the same person. So
okay,
perfect.
You like fooled me.
Yeah.
Well, promise me you'll release a soundtrack. I'd love to have one.
There are, I think, 2 covers that we did for this, and I don't know even if those could be released or not, and the other stuff. Totally up to Susan, that kind of thing.
Yeah, everything licensed, everything above.
Everything's cleared.
Yeah.
Well, just to change pace a little bit, this documentary, to put it out there, some people find this documentary very unsettling. And as one of your interviewees says, the film could be described as creeped out but fascinating. Now, you say yourself that you don't know if you made it to defend Spain or defend yourself. So can you just expand on that a little bit and let us know what you discovered?
Yes, that's a great question. And I want to thank Mill Valley for showing the film, because I think there might be some festivals that shied away from it. There's nothing terrible in it, I don't think. It's just that Spain expressed his heterosexual lust on the page. So there are naked women in this film. I have to say that Spain's story is really the inverse of a lot of the stories that we're grappling with today. A lot of the time we're asked to grapple with stories of, well, it's usually men who seem wonderful, they're just right, all approved and great guys, but actually they turn out to be scumbags in the way that they've actually treated women. Spain, as far as I know, and I'm an investigative reporter, I tried to dig into his past that would have been unknown to me. Spain was not a scumbag. He treated girls and women well, and he was a beloved teacher of young women and young men at the Mission Cultural Center and other places. I'm not aware of any accusations of impropriety against him. But again, he liked to draw images of sexy women. And I welcome a conversation about what is sexism and is that sexist or is it not? I don't believe it was. On the other hand, he also Spain was very angry and a very committed activist on the issue of what is now politely called income inequality, used to be called class war. That's what Spain would have called it. Now it gets, we politely talk about food insecurity. Well, that's hunger and poverty. And he would have called it those things. And he called it out in that way in his drawings and was not kind to the plutocrats that were doing things that sacrificed poor people. It was clear what side he was on. And so some people find that offensive as well. I'm happy to offend.
Yes. And later on, his female characters became very powerful. And that's very enlightening and very encouraging.
His female characters were always that way. He didn't draw women as victims. He was not among those that drew women being raped or abused. He always drew these very powerful warrior females. For some people that matters. And it shows him to have been someone who valued women's power and didn't subjugate women. For other people, that doesn't matter. And the fact that they're very sexual as well as powerful is disturbing.
Yeah, it's very interesting because he was an artist, of course, but he was also a storyteller of his own experiences. And that was even before there was such a thing as political correctness, I think, or wokeness, which is very interesting and very, very revealing.
Yes, I mean, one of the things I'd like people to understand from this, there's a large industry now of alternative comics, and all sorts of people are doing wonderful things. Muslim women in the United States are doing wonderful things, non-binary people. But that ground was broken. That door was kicked down by underground comics in the 1960s. So at least let's have some respect for that.
Yeah.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask is, what do you hope audience will take away from this film?
I hope audiences will understand the role of underground comics and the way that it kicked down the doors for self-expression. I hope audiences will cultivate an atmosphere where we can discuss our differences and not try to suppress them.
Let's hope. Let's keep our fingers crossed on that.
Yeah.
We need that more in this world. So what's next for you? Do you have any other projects in the works? Any of you?
Quincy, Victoria?
Well, I've been working with Greta Schiller, promoting the film The Land of Azaba and The Five Demands. And The Five Demands is up for a Ken Burns Documentary Award. So I'm very excited about this. Yeah.
Yeah, let's stay in touch on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just wrapping up this album that's been taking a lot of time with Luc Montfranc. So that's going to be out. We're at the mastering stage and ready to start moving it along. And then I have a couple other documentaries potentially in the pipe coming up.
What's the name of the album?
The Light of the Sun.
Nice. Nice. Yes. If we have one more minute, I just want to dedicate our screening to the late, great Latina artist, Yolanda Lopez, who's in the film and who just passed away.
Well, Susan, how will Bad Attitude be available for others to see? Do you have distribution in the works? I know the film business is just wacko right now.
Yes.
How will, like, people that have just seen it now, how can they tell their friends they've got to see this film?
Yes. Well, they should go to the website, badattitudemovie.com, and that will be updated and information on other festivals that are following Mill Valley, and its distribution will all be there. That's badattitudemovie.com.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you so much for making this incredibly important film, and I hope more people can see it soon. And keep up the good work.
Okay, thank you for programming it at the Mill Valley Film Festival. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.